The chandeliers of the Golden Spoon cast a warm glow over white tablecloths as Tiana Reynolds balanced 3 plates along her arm. She'd mastered this particular skill during her 4 years working at the upscale restaurant, nestled in the heart of the financial district. The dinner rush had begun, and the quiet murmur of business deals and clinking glasses filled the air. "Table 7 needs more sparkling water," whispered Carlos, another server who'd been showing her the ropes when she first started. He passed her with a tray of cocktails, shooting her a look that said good luck as he nodded toward her section. Tiana glanced at the table in question. 4 businessmen in suits worth more than her monthly rent were engaged in conversation that occasionally erupted into loud laughter. She'd served enough wealthy patrons to recognize the signs. The night would be long, the demands particular, and the tips. Well, that was always a gamble. "I've got it," she said, setting down the last plate at table 12 with a practiced smile. "Enjoy your meal." At 28, Tiana's hands told 2 stories. The short, practical nails and calloused palms spoke of someone who carried trays and scrubbed tables. But her long, elegant fingers belonged to a different life, one she visited less frequently these days, usually late at night when her small apartment was quiet and her roommate was asleep. Those were the hands that once danced across piano keys at Cartwright School of Music, before real life had intervened. She made her way to the service station, filling a crystal pitcher with sparkling water. Her feet ached in the sensible black shoes that still somehow managed to pinch after a double shift. She'd been at the Golden Spoon since noon, and now at 8 in the evening she had at least 4 more hours ahead of her. Thursday nights were always busy, but she couldn't afford to pass up the shift, not with tuition payments coming due and her mother's medical bills piling up back home. The restaurant's decor was meant to impress, all dark wood, white linens, and tasteful art. In the corner stood a grand piano, occasionally played during weekend brunches but mostly serving as an expensive decoration. Tiana sometimes found her eyes wandering to it during quiet moments, her fingers unconsciously tapping out melodies on her thigh as she waited for the bartender to finish drink orders. Tonight, though there was no time for daydreaming, the restaurant was fully booked, including a VIP reservation that had the management on edge. Victor Blackwell, tech billionaire and founder of Blackwell Innovations, was bringing in potential investors for dinner. "He's here," hissed Lisa, the hostess, as she rushed past Tiana toward the front door. Mr. Blackwell just pulled up. The restaurant manager, Mr. Peterson, immediately emerged from his office, straightening his tie and instructing the staff to be particularly attentive. "Reynolds," he said, catching Tiana's arm as she passed, "I'm putting you on their table. Don't mess this up. Blackwell's party could mean big business for us." Tiana nodded, though her stomach tightened. VIP tables were both an opportunity and a risk. The tips could be generous, but the scrutiny was intense, and some wealthy clients treated servers like furniture rather than people. The group entered with the confidence of those accustomed to commanding attention. Victor Blackwell led the way, mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that suggested both money and taste. He didn't so much walk as stride, barely acknowledging the staff who scrambled to accommodate his party of 6. "Mr. Blackwell, welcome to the Golden Spoon," said Mr. Peterson with a deferential smile. "We're honored to have you dining with us tonight. We've reserved our best table, of course." Blackwell nodded absently, checking his watch as the hostess led them to a prime location near the windows, but with enough privacy for business discussions. Tiana watched from a distance, taking a deep breath before approaching with menus. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and professional. "Welcome to the Golden Spoon. My name is Tiana, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Most of the men barely glanced up, already engaged in conversation. Blackwell, however, gave her a brief once-over before returning to his phone. Tiana distributed the menus with practiced ease, describing the evening's specials with just the right amount of detail. "And our chef has prepared a special truffle risotto that—" "We'll start with your best champagne," Blackwell interrupted, not looking up from his device. "Dom Perignon 2008 if you have it." "Of course, sir," Tiana replied, maintaining her smile despite the interruption. "I'll bring that right away." As she turned to leave, she overheard one of the men at the table, younger than the others, with an expensive watch that he seemed conscious of displaying, asking Blackwell about the potential deal they were discussing. "We'll get to that, Jackson," Blackwell replied. Let's enjoy dinner first. I've heard this place has decent food, though nothing extraordinary. Tiana returned with the champagne, skillfully opening and pouring it without spilling a drop. She'd learned this particular skill during a brief stint at a wine bar 2 years ago, before the Golden Spoon had offered better hours that allowed her to take night classes. "Are you ready to order? Or would you like more time with the menus?" she asked after serving the champagne. "I'll have the ribeye rare," Blackwell said without consulting the menu. "And make sure it's actually rare, not medium rare like most places serve." Tiana nodded, turning to the next gentleman. "Just a moment," Blackwell cut in. "What do you recommend here?"
Anything actually worth eating?
The question wasn't friendly. It carried an edge of challenge. The table grew quiet, all eyes on her. "Our chef does an excellent job with the sea bass," Tiana answered smoothly. "It's served with a lemon beurre blanc that's quite delightful." "Delightful," Blackwell repeated, raising an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words for a server. Tiana maintained her professional demeanor. "The ribeye is also an excellent choice, sir. You won't be disappointed." He seemed almost disappointed by her composure, turning back to his companions as she took the remaining orders. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of the next few hours settling on her shoulders. The evening progressed with increasing demands from Blackwell's table. The wine wasn't properly aerated. The bread wasn't warm enough. The lighting was too bright, then too dim. With each complaint, Tiana responded with patience and efficiency, even as Blackwell's behavior grew more dismissive. "You'd think for these prices, they'd train the staff better," he remarked loudly as Tiana cleared their appetizer plates. She pretended not to hear, but felt her cheeks warm. Between serving Blackwell's table and her other 3 tables, Tiana barely had a moment to breathe. In the kitchen, Carlos gave her a sympathetic look as she waited for an order. "That bad?" he asked, helping her arrange dishes on her tray. "Nothing I haven't handled before," she replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a few more hours." "Your night class got canceled again?" Tiana nodded. "Professor's sick. Silver lining, I guess. More time to make tips." She'd been working toward her business degree for 3 years now, taking classes whenever she could afford them. At this rate, she calculated another 2 years before graduation. When she returned to the dining room, Blackwell's party had grown louder with each round of drinks. Their main courses were well received, despite Blackwell sending back his steak for being too done even though it had been perfectly rare. The second steak, practically blue, finally met his approval. As Tiana cleared their dinner plates, preparing to offer dessert, she noticed Blackwell staring at her hands. "You have pianist's fingers," he remarked suddenly. Tiana paused, caught off guard by the observation. "I used to play," she answered simply, continuing to stack plates. "Used to?" He seemed genuinely curious for the first time that evening. "Life happens," she said with a small shrug, not wanting to explain how her mother's illness had forced her to drop out of music school, how the scholarship hadn't covered everything, how she'd chosen family responsibilities over her passion. Blackwell seemed ready to ask more, but was distracted by one of his business associates bringing up the deal they were there to discuss. Tiana slipped away with the dishes, returning shortly after to offer coffee and dessert. As the night wore on, the champagne bottles emptied and were replaced with expensive scotch. Blackwell's group was now the loudest in the restaurant, drawing occasional glances from other diners. Their business talk had given way to boasting and increasingly inappropriate jokes. Tiana maintained her professional distance, appearing only when needed and otherwise giving them space. It was a skill she'd perfected, being invisible until required, a ghost that kept glasses filled and plates cleared without interrupting. But as midnight approached and the restaurant began to empty, Blackwell's focus shifted back to her. Perhaps bored with his companions or simply looking for new entertainment, he began to ask personal questions whenever she approached the table. "So, Tiana," he said, rolling her name around as though tasting it. "If you used to play piano, what are you doing waiting tables? Didn't have what it takes?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. The other men at the table watched with interest, sensing the shift in dynamics. "I'm working my way through college," she answered evenly. "And helping family." "College," he repeated as though the concept amused him. "Studying what?" "Let me guess. Something sensible and boring?" "Business administration," she replied, beginning to clear their dessert plates. "Planning to open your own restaurant someday?" He asked with a laugh that his companions echoed. Perhaps, she said, not rising to the bait. Would you like the check now, sir? Blackwell waved his hand dismissively. Not yet. We're still celebrating. In fact, his eyes drifted to the corner of the restaurant where the grand piano sat silent and gleaming under soft lights. Since you're a pianist, why don't you play something for us? Tiana froze, her tray balanced perfectly against her hip. The restaurant had grown quiet as the night progressed, with only a handful of tables still occupied. Those remaining diners now glanced toward Blackwell's table, their attention drawn by his raised voice. I don't play anymore, Tiana said quietly, keeping her tone professional despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. It's been years, Blackwell's eyebrow arched. Come now, it's like riding a bicycle, isn't it? Once you learn, you never forget. He turned to his companions, who watched with varying degrees of amusement. Don't you all think we deserve some entertainment? The food was, he waved his hand vaguely, adequate, but the night needs something special. One of the men, a thin, nervous-looking individual who had been quiet most of the evening, shifted uncomfortably. Victor, perhaps we should just call it a night. It's getting late. Nonsense, Howard, Blackwell replied, his words slightly slurred from the evening's drinking. We're celebrating. And our waitress here, Tiana, was it? Apparently as hidden talents, Tiana could feel eyes on her from all directions. Carlos had emerged from the kitchen and stood by the service station, watching with concern. Mr. Peterson hovered near the bar, his expression torn between pleasing his wealthy customer and protecting his staff. In the kitchen doorway, she could see the chef and a few other servers watching the scene unfold. I'm sorry, sir, she said, straightening her shoulders. I'm working and there are other guests to attend to. Blackwell's smile didn't waver, but something in his eyes hardened. I'm sure your manager wouldn't mind you taking a short break to entertain us. Would you, sir? He directed this last question to Mr. Peterson, who immediately crossed the room. Is there a problem here? Mr. Peterson asked, his voice overly cheerful. No problem, Blackwell replied. We were just discussing how your waitress here is apparently a pianist, and we thought it would be nice to hear her play. A beautiful instrument is just sitting there unused. Mr. Peterson hesitated, glancing between Tiana and Blackwell. The Billionaire's party represented thousands in revenue for the restaurant, not to mention potential future business. Tiana could read the calculation in his eyes. Tiana is one of our best servers, he began carefully. Then surely she deserves a moment to showcase all her talents, Blackwell interrupted, unless she was lying about being a pianist. He looked at Tiana with a challenging smirk. The insinuation hung in the air. Tiana felt a flush of anger rise from her neck to her cheeks. She hadn't lied. She had trained for years, had once been headed for a career in music before life took a different turn. That this man would suggest she was making it up, just because she was serving his dinner? I don't think anyone's suggesting that, Mr. Peterson said, still trying to navigate the uncomfortable situation. He turned to Tiana with an apologetic expression. Perhaps just a short piece? If you wouldn't mind. And there it was. Her own manager throwing her to the wolves. Tiana looked around the restaurant. The remaining diners watched with undisguised interest. Her co-workers stood frozen, witnessing her humiliation but powerless to intervene. She thought about walking out, just taking off her apron, grabbing her coat, and never coming back. But then she thought about her rent due next week, her mother's medication, her tuition payment. Blackwell was watching her, that smug smile still playing on his lips, clearly enjoying her discomfort. His companions shifted awkwardly, some looking embarrassed by the situation but none willing to challenge him. I bet she can't actually play, Blackwell said to the table, though loudly enough for everyone to hear. Probably just trying to sound interesting, something inside Tiana snapped. Not anger, though there was plenty of that, but a quiet resolve. She had spent years bending to the whims of entitled customers, swallowing her pride for the sake of tips and a steady paycheck. But there were limits. She set down her tray carefully on the nearest empty table. With deliberate movements, she untied her black apron and folded it neatly, placing it beside the tray. The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to watch. One song, she said, her voice steady and clear. Blackwell's expression shifted to surprise, then triumph. He gestured grandly toward the piano. The stage is yours. Tiana walked across the dining room, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. The grand piano stood in the corner, its polished surface reflecting the soft overhead lights. It was a Steinway, she noted, similar to the one she had practiced on at Cartwright before everything changed. She ran her fingers lightly over the fallboard, then lifted it to reveal the keys beneath. The piano bench felt both foreign and familiar as she sat down. How long had it been since she'd played seriously? 3 years? 4? She still played occasionally on the old upright in her apartment building's community room, when no one was around to hear her fumbling through pieces that had once been second nature. Blackwell and his group were watching expectantly. One of them, the youngest, had taken out his phone and was holding it up, clearly intending to record whatever was about to happen. Tiana felt a flash of panic. What if she couldn't remember anything? What if her fingers, now more accustomed to carrying plates than striking keys, failed her completely? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. What could she play? Her mind raced through possibilities. Something simple, perhaps, for Elise, or a basic Mozart piece. But that felt like a surrender, like giving Blackwell exactly what he expected, a waitress fumbling through a beginner's piece. No. If she was going to do this, she would do it properly. She positioned her hands above the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the restaurant. The piece began softly, almost tentatively, as though asking a question. Tiana's fingers moved from memory, finding their way back to familiar patterns. The first few measures were shaky. She missed a note, her timing slightly off, but then something shifted. It was like sinking into a warm bath. The years fell away, and suddenly she was 18 again, practicing for hours in the small rehearsal rooms at Cartwright, her teacher pushing her to feel the music, not just play it. The piece built gradually, growing more complex, more emotional. Her hands stretched across the keys, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. She forgot about Blackwell, about the restaurant, about the eyes watching her. There was only the music, the story it told of hope and longing and loss. Her body swayed slightly as she played, the tension in her shoulders melting away with each phrase. The technical challenges that had once required all her concentration now felt natural, her fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. In the dining room, the atmosphere had transformed. Servers stood motionless, trays forgotten in their hands. Diners sat with forks suspended midway to their mouths, and at the VIP table, Blackwell's smug expression had evaporated, replaced by genuine shock. As the piece progressed into its more dramatic sections, Tiana gave herself over to it completely. Her fingers flew across the keys during the faster passages, then lingered deliberately over the more contemplative moments. The emotional range of the piece, from gentle melody to thundering intensity, filled the space, bouncing off the high ceilings and polished surfaces. She made mistakes, a wrong note here, a slight hesitation there, but they didn't matter. What mattered was the story she was telling through Chopin's notes, the way the music spoke of struggle and triumph, of beauty found in unexpected places. As she approached the final section of the piece, building toward its powerful conclusion, she opened her eyes. The restaurant swam back into focus, the hanging lights, the white tablecloths, the stunned faces watching her. At Blackwell's table, the young man had lowered his phone, seemingly too captivated to remember he was recording. The nervous man, Howard, had tears in his eyes, and Blackwell himself sat rigid in his chair, his expression unreadable, the glass of scotch forgotten in his hand. Tiana brought the piece to its conclusion, the final notes resonating through the silent restaurant. For a moment she remained motionless, hands hovering above the keys, the last chord still hanging in the air. Then she stood, smoothed her black skirt, and walked back to where she had left her apron. No one spoke. No one moved. She could feel Blackwell's eyes following her, but she didn't look in his direction. With steady hands, she retied her apron and picked up her tray. Only then did she allow herself to glance around the room. Mr. Peterson stood open-mouthed near the bar. Carlos gave her a small, incredulous nod of respect. At the far end of the dining room, an older couple had risen to their feet, the gentleman's hands poised to clap, and that was when the silence broke. The applause began with the older couple and quickly spread throughout the restaurant. What started as polite clapping swelled into something more genuine, punctuated by voices calling "bravo" and "magnificent." Even the kitchen staff joined in, their white uniforms visible through the service door as they clustered together, clapping enthusiastically. Tiana stood still, tray in hand, uncertain how to respond. This wasn't a concert hall and she wasn't a performer, at least not anymore. She was a waitress who had just been forced into an uncomfortable situation, and yet the warmth of the recognition washed over her like sunlight after a long winter. She gave a small, awkward bow, which only intensified the applause. Mr. Peterson approached her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Part amazement, part calculation. That was unexpected, he said, his voice barely audible over the continued applause. I had no idea. May I get back to work now? Tiana asked, her professional mask slipping back into place despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Before Mr. Peterson could answer, an older gentleman rose from his table and approached them. He was well-dressed but not flashy, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Excuse me, he said, addressing Tiana directly. That was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, was it not? Played beautifully. Tiana nodded, surprised. Yes, thank you. I'm David Chen, the man continued, extending his hand. I conduct the City Symphony Orchestra. Tiana nearly dropped her tray. She knew the name, of course. Anyone who had studied classical piano knew of David Chen, whose interpretations of romantic composers had earned him international acclaim. It's an honor, she managed to say, shifting her tray to shake his hand. I'm Tiana Reynolds. Ms. Reynolds, Chen said, his eyes twinkling. Where did you study? Your technique reminds me of Elizabeth Morton's teaching. Cartwright School of Music, Tiana replied. And yes, Professor Morton was my teacher for 3 years. Chen nodded as though this confirmed something. I thought so. She has a distinctive approach to Chopin. May I ask why you're not playing professionally? With that level of talent, life happened, Tiana interrupted, then caught herself. I'm sorry, that was rude. There were family circumstances and I had to leave the program. Chen reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. Well, Ms. Reynolds, life happens to all of us, but talent like yours shouldn't be wasted serving drinks, if you'll forgive my bluntness. I'd like you to call my office tomorrow. We should talk. Tiana accepted the card with numb fingers, reading the embossed lettering. David Chen, Musical Director, City Symphony Orchestra. Below was a phone number and email address. Thank you, she said, unable to formulate a more coherent response. Chen smiled and returned to his table, where his companion, a woman with striking white hair, was watching the exchange with interest. The applause had finally died down, and the restaurant was returning to its normal hum of conversation, though many diners still glanced at Tiana with newfound respect. She turned back to Mr. Peterson, who was eyeing the business card in her hand. Take 15 minutes, he said, surprising her. Get some air. I'll cover your tables. Tiana nodded gratefully and headed toward the back of the restaurant, needing a moment to process what had just happened. As she passed Blackwell's table, she kept her eyes forward, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. Wait. Blackwell's voice stopped her. Reluctantly, she turned. The billionaire's expression was difficult to read, a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and something else. The smug superiority had vanished, replaced by what appeared to be genuine contemplation. That was extraordinary, he said, his voice lacking its earlier condescension. Where did you learn to play like that? As I mentioned before, Tiana replied coolly. I studied music before circumstances required a change of plans. Circumstances, Blackwell repeated. He seemed about to say more, but Howard, the quiet man, leaned forward. That was truly remarkable, Howard said, his voice soft but sincere. Thank you for sharing your gift with us tonight. The others at the table murmured agreement, none meeting her eyes directly, perhaps embarrassed by their earlier behavior or by their boss's conduct. You're welcome, Tiana said simply, and continued toward the back door. She needed air, needed space to think, needed a moment away from the eyes that now followed her every move. The alley behind the restaurant was quiet, the night air cool against her flushed skin. She leaned against the brick wall, breathing deeply, the business card still clutched in her hand. What had just happened? Had the David Chen, really just offered her? What exactly, a chance? An opportunity? After all these years? The back door opened and Carlos stepped out, concern etched on his face. You okay? He asked, offering her a glass of water. Tiana accepted it gratefully. I think so. Just Processing. That was unbelievable in there, Carlos said, shaking his head in wonder. Why didn't you ever mention you could play like that? It wasn't relevant to carrying plates, Tiana replied with a small shrug. Besides, it's been years since I played seriously. Could have fooled me, Carlos said. And apparently everyone else in there, including that guy from the orchestra. Tiana looked down at the card in her hand. Yeah, you going to call him? I don't know. The truth was, she hadn't allowed herself to think about music as a career path in so long that the possibility seemed almost frightening. It's complicated. Carlos nodded, understanding without needing details. Well, just so you know, Peterson's in there telling everyone how he always knew you had special talent. Taking credit for discovering you or something. That made Tiana laugh, breaking the tension. Of course he is. And that Blackwell guy asked for the check. Left a $1,000 tip. Tiana blinked in surprise. $1,000? Yeah, and he asked Peterson for your full name. Don't worry, Carlos added quickly, seeing her expression. Peterson didn't give it to him. Said it was against policy. Small mercies, Tiana murmured. The last thing she wanted was Victor Blackwell looking her up, whether from guilt, curiosity, or some misguided attempt at amends. You should get back in there, Carlos said. Your tables are asking for you. You're kind of a celebrity now. Tiana took one more deep breath and straightened her uniform. 15 more minutes and my shift ends. I can handle anything for 15 minutes. When she re-entered the restaurant, the atmosphere had shifted. Customers smiled at her as she passed. A woman at one of her tables asked about her musical background, seeming genuinely interested. The bartender gave her a thumbs up as she passed. It was strange, this new visibility. For years she had perfected the art of being unobtrusive, of anticipating needs without drawing attention to herself. Now everyone seemed to see her. Blackwell's table was empty, the group having departed while she was outside. Only their generous tip remained, along with a folded piece of paper. Tiana hesitated before picking it up, half expecting some backhanded comment or insincere apology. Inside was a business card. Victor Blackwell, CEO. Blackwell Innovations, with a phone number circled and a handwritten note. My sincere apologies for my behavior. If you're interested in discussing potential opportunities, please call. No strings attached. Tiana slipped the card into her pocket alongside David Chen's, unsure what to make of it. One opportunity born of genuine appreciation for her talent, the other possibly from guilt or some sort of savior complex. Both represented doors that had long been closed to her. As she finished her shift, bussing tables and closing out checks, her mind kept returning to the feeling of the piano keys beneath her fingers. It had been like coming home, like speaking her native language after years in a foreign country. Had she really convinced herself she could live without that feeling? By the time she clocked out at 1 a.m, exhaustion had set in, but her mind was still racing. Outside the restaurant, the city streets were quiet, most of the office buildings dark. She walked to the bus stop, her jacket pulled tight against the cool night air. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. How was work? Such a simple question for such an extraordinary night. As she waited for the bus, she typed back, "You won't believe what happened." The night bus appeared at the corner, its headlights illuminating the empty street. As it pulled up to her stop, Tiana made a decision. Tomorrow she would call David Chen. She would at least hear what he had to say. Maybe life had taken an unexpected detour, but perhaps that detour was finally leading her back to where she was meant to be all along. The bus doors opened with a hydraulic sigh. Tiana stepped aboard, paid her fare, and found a seat near the back. Through the window she could see the Golden Spoon, its elegant facade now dark except for the security lights. For 4 years it had been just a job, a way to pay bills and keep her head above water. Now, it might become the place where everything changed. Tiana woke to the insistent buzz of her phone sliding across her nightstand. Squinting at the bright screen, she saw it was already past noon. Not surprising after getting home at nearly 2 a.m. What was surprising were the 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and countless social media notifications lighting up her phone. She sat up, suddenly wide awake. The events of the previous night came flooding back. The piano, the applause, David Chen's business card that now sat on her nightstand. But why all these notifications? A text from Carlos answered her question. You're going viral. Check your socials. With growing disbelief, Tiana opened the video link he'd sent. There she was, sitting at the grand piano in the Golden Spoon, playing Chopin. The video had clearly been taken by one of Blackwell's associates, the young one with the phone. The caption read, "Billionaire tries to humiliate Waitress, discovers hidden prodigy instead." The view count was already over 2 million. "Oh no," Tiana whispered, scrolling through the comments. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." When she starts playing and his smug face just drops. "Someone get this woman a recording contract." I'm crying. Actual tears. Her roommate Zoe knocked softly before poking her head in. "You're finally up, so..." "You're internet famous?" Tiana groaned, falling back against her pillows. "Apparently. The restaurant called twice, your mom called too. She saw the video, your aunt sent it to her. And someone from the local news left a message on our landline. I didn't even know we had a working landline." "This is insane," Tiana muttered, scrolling through more notifications. "All I did was play the piano. All you did was absolutely destroy a billionaire who tried to humiliate you," Zoe corrected, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's like a movie moment. People love that stuff." Tiana's phone buzzed again, another call from the restaurant. This time she answered, "Tiana, thank goodness." Mr. Peterson's voice was almost unrecognizable in its enthusiasm. "We've been trying to reach you all morning." "I was asleep," she said flatly. "Late night. You know, working." Yes, of course," he continued, either missing or ignoring her tone. "Listen, the restaurant's phone has been ringing nonstop. We've got reservations pouring in. People are asking if you'll be playing tonight." "Playing?" Tiana repeated, incredulous. "I'm a server." "Well, yes, technically. But after last night..." "Tiana, this could be huge for the restaurant. For you too, of course. I spoke with the owner this morning. We're prepared to offer you a significant raise if you'd consider playing piano during your shifts. Just an hour or so. Nothing that would interfere with your serving duties." Tiana bit back a laugh. Nothing that would interfere with her serving duties. As if playing concert piano was just a minor addition to carrying plates and taking orders. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I'm not on the schedule until tomorrow night." "Actually," Mr. Peterson sounded slightly uncomfortable now, "we were hoping you might come in tonight. Just for a couple of hours." The owner mentioned a substantial bonus. Tiana thought of her dwindling bank account, the tuition payment coming due, her mother's medical bills. How substantial? After negotiating terms that were indeed substantial, Tiana ended the call and stared at the ceiling. Her quiet life had suddenly become very complicated. She still needed to call David Chen, figure out what to do about the viral video, and now apparently prepare for an impromptu piano performance that evening. First things first. She dialed the number on Chen's business card, half expecting to reach a secretary or answering machine. Instead, he picked up on the second ring. David Chen speaking. "Mr. Chen, this is Tiana Reynolds. From last night?" "Ms. Reynolds," his voice warmed immediately. "I'm delighted you called. I was just watching a rather impressive video of you that seems to be making the rounds online." Tiana winced. "About that? I had no idea someone was recording." "Well, I'm glad they did. It's bringing your talent to a much wider audience than just those of us lucky enough to be at the restaurant last night. Have you been getting calls?" "My phone hasn't stopped buzzing," she admitted. "I'm not surprised. Listen, I meant what I said last night. I'd like to discuss some possibilities with you. Are you familiar with our Young Artist program?" Tiana sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. The program was well known in music circles, a prestigious fellowship for emerging musicians to perform with the City Symphony while receiving mentorship and training. We're actually looking for a pianist right now. Our previous fellow accepted a position with the National Symphony. The timing seems rather fortuitous, doesn't it?" Tiana's heart raced. Are you offering me an audition?" "I'm offering you considerably more than that based on what I heard last night. But yes, there would need to be a formal audition for the board. Politics, you understand. Could you come to the concert hall tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock? We could discuss the details." "Yes," Tiana said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I can be there." After they said goodbye, Tiana sat motionless on her bed, phone still clutched in her hand. The Young Artist program. It had been her dream once before she'd been forced to abandon music. A chance to perform professionally while continuing to develop her skills with a stipend generous enough to live on. but it had been years since she'd played seriously. One successful performance born from muscle memory and adrenaline didn't mean she could compete at a professional level again. She would need to practice intensively, prepare audition pieces, get her technique back. Her thoughts were interrupted by another call, this one from her mother. "Baby girl." Her mother's voice was thick with emotion. "I just saw you playing. Why didn't you tell me you were performing again?" Tiana explained the events of the previous night, trying to downplay the confrontation with Blackwell and emphasize the unexpected opportunity with Chen. "The Young Artist Program," her mother repeated, awe in her voice. "That was your dream in high school." "Mom, I don't know if I can do it," Tiana admitted. "It's been so long and I'm rusty. Plus there's school and work and nothing," her mother interrupted firmly. "Tiana Reynolds, you listen to me." "When you had to leave Cartwright to help with my medical bills, I told myself it was temporary, that somehow someday you'd find your way back to music. You are too talented to spend your life serving other people dinner." "But the medical bills are being managed," her mother insisted. "The new insurance is covering most of it now, and your brother's promotion means he can help more. You've put your life on hold for us long enough." Tears welled in Tiana's eyes. "What if I'm not good enough anymore?" "Then you practice until you are," her mother said simply. "But that video tells me you're still exactly who you've always been. A gifted musician who belongs on stage, not carrying trays." By the time evening came, Tiana had responded to dozens of messages, practiced for 2 hours on the old upright in her building's community room, and changed outfits 3 times. The Golden Spoon had posted about her performance on their social media, and according to Carlos, they were fully booked with a waiting list. When she arrived, Mr. Peterson greeted her like visiting royalty instead of the employee he'd been ready to sacrifice to Blackwell's whims just 24 hours earlier. "Tiana, our star." He ushered her inside, where she was startled to see the restaurant's layout had been slightly rearranged. The piano had been moved to a more central location, with several tables repositioned to create better sightlines. "We thought this would work better for your performance," Mr. Peterson explained, noticing her surprise. "Don't worry, it won't interfere with service flow." The restaurant was already buzzing with energy, more crowded than she'd ever seen it on a weeknight. As she walked through the dining room, she noticed people pointing, whispering, a few even taking photos. It was surreal. In the break room, she found a bouquet of flowers with a card from the owner, thanking her for the unprecedented publicity and confirming the bonus they'd discussed. There was also a garment bag hanging in her locker. "What's this?" she asked Carlos, who was adjusting his tie nearby. "Management thought you might want something more performance appropriate," he said with a grin. "Don't worry, it's not too fancy. Just a simple black dress. Classier than the server uniform, but not over the top." Tiana shook her head in disbelief but took the garment bag to the restroom to change. The dress was indeed simple but elegant, knee-length with 3/4 sleeves and a modest neckline. Professional, dignified, and a far cry from the black pants and white shirt she'd worn as a server. When she emerged, Carlos gave a low whistle. "Now you look like a concert pianist." "I'm still a server," she reminded him, though the words felt less certain than they had a day ago. "For now," he replied with a wink. "Now go knock 'em dead again." The evening passed in a blur. Tiana played for an hour, a carefully selected program of pieces she knew well enough to perform without extensive practice. Some Chopin, of course, but also Bach and Debussy. The audience response was overwhelming, the applause after each piece thunderous. Between sets, she moved through the dining room, answering questions and accepting compliments with a growing sense of confidence. Near the end of the night, as she returned to the piano for a final piece, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Reynolds, Victor Blackwell here. I see from social media that you're performing again tonight. I want to apologize once more for my behavior and make amends. I've established a scholarship fund at Cartwright School of Music in your name, $100,000 annually for talented students facing financial hardship. No strings attached, no publicity required. It's the least I can do. Good luck with whatever you choose next. You have extraordinary talent." Tiana read the message twice, emotions warring within her. On one hand, the gesture seemed genuine and could help students like her who had to abandon their dreams due to financial constraints. On the other hand, did Blackwell think he could simply throw money at the problem of his behavior? She set her phone aside without responding. That was a decision for tomorrow. Tonight belonged to the music. As she played the final notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune, Tiana allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one she'd resigned herself to. One with concert halls instead of dining rooms, audiences who came specifically to hear her play, and the freedom to pursue the passion she'd reluctantly set aside. Tomorrow, she would meet with David Chen. Tomorrow, she would begin to see if that future could become reality. For tonight, she simply played, letting the music speak for itself. 6 months later, Tiana stood backstage at the City Concert Hall, her fingers moving silently through the opening measures of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. In a few minutes, she would walk onto the stage to perform with the full orchestra, her debut as the featured soloist with the City Symphony. Nervous? David Chen appeared beside her, dressed in his conductor's tails, a gentle smile on his face. Terrified, Tiana admitted with a small laugh. But the good kind of terrified. You're more than ready, Chen assured her. You've put in the work. Now just enjoy the moment. Tiana nodded, thinking back to how much her life had changed in half a year. The day after her impromptu performance at the Golden Spoon, she had met with Chen at the concert hall. Rather than a formal audition, he had simply asked her to play, whatever she wanted for as long as she wanted. She had chosen pieces that showcased different aspects of her technique. Bach for precision, Chopin for emotion, Liszt for virtuosity. When she finished, Chen had nodded thoughtfully. You need work, he'd said bluntly. Your technique has suffered from the years away, but your musicality, your interpretation, those are gifts that can't be taught. The rest can be rebuilt with practice. He had offered her a modified position with the Young Artist Program, a 6-month intensive to help her regain her technical skills, followed by a formal debut if she progressed as he expected. The stipend was enough to live on, allowing her to reduce her hours at the restaurant to just 1 shift a week, which she kept more out of loyalty to Carlos and the other staff than financial necessity. The viral video had continued to circulate, eventually catching the attention of a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell her story. The resulting short film, Silenced, the Tiana Reynolds story, had premiered at an independent film festival 2 months ago, bringing even more attention to her journey. 2 minutes, the stage manager called, bringing Tiana back to the present moment. She smoothed the front of her concert gown, a simple but elegant black dress with subtle beading around the neckline, purchased with her first stipend check. In the front row tonight would be her mother, finally healthy enough to travel, her brother and his wife, Zoe, Carlos, and several of her former colleagues from the Golden Spoon. The restaurant had given the entire waitstaff the night off and provided transportation so they could attend her debut. Notably absent would be Victor Blackwell. After careful consideration, Tiana had responded to his text about the scholarship fund. She had thanked him for the gesture but made it clear that while she appreciated the opportunity it would provide for students like herself, she wasn't interested in having any personal connection with him. The scholarship, now called the Reynolds Opportunity Fund at her request, had already helped 3 students remain in their music programs despite financial hardships. Places? Please, the stage manager called. Chen gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Remember what we talked about. It's just you and the music. Everything else falls away. Tiana took a deep breath and nodded. As Chen walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, she closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. 6 months of intensive training had transformed her playing. 6 months of 8-hour practice days of master classes and private lessons, of rebuilding the technical foundation that had begun to erode during her years away from music. There had been moments of doubt, of frustration, of hands cramping and shoulders aching, of passages that refused to flow smoothly no matter how many times she repeated them. But there had also been breakthroughs. The day when a particularly difficult section suddenly clicked into place, the moment when Chen had stopped her mid-piece with tears in his eyes, saying simply, "That, hold on to that." The applause swelled again, and Tiana knew it was her cue. She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her as she made her way to the gleaming grand piano at the center. The audience stretched before her, hundreds of faces blurring into a collective presence. She spotted her mother in the front row, dabbing at her eyes already, and Carlos giving her a discreet thumbs up. Tiana took her place at the piano, adjusting the bench slightly, then nodded to Chen. The orchestra began the dark, pulsing opening of the Rachmaninoff concerto, those famous chords that seemed to rise from the depths of despair. Tiana's hands hovered above the keys, waiting for her entrance, her mind clear of everything except the music that was about to flow through her. Her fingers touched the keys and she was home. The concerto passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. There were moments when Tiana felt as though she was floating above herself, watching her hands move across the keys with a will of their own, and other moments of intense presence where she felt every note resonating through her body. The orchestra surrounded her with sound, Chen's conducting guiding them all through the emotional landscape of the piece. When the final triumphant chords rang out, Tiana remained motionless for a second, letting the sound wash over her. Then the audience erupted. They rose to their feet as one, applause thundering through the concert hall. Chen extended his hand to her and she rose, moving to the front of the stage to take a bow. Flowers appeared, a bouquet handed to her by the concertmaster. She accepted them with a smile that she couldn't have suppressed if she tried. The applause continued, wave after wave of it, and Tiana took another bow, then gestured to the orchestra, acknowledging their role in the performance. As the applause finally began to subside and she made her way backstage, Tiana felt a sense of completion, as though a circle had been drawn closed. The path from aspiring pianist to waitress and back to musician hadn't been straight or easy, but it had led her here, to this moment. After the performance, there was a reception in the concert hall's atrium. Tiana found herself surrounded by well-wishers, board members, donors, music critics, and her own personal cheering section. Her mother reached her first, enfolding her in a tearful embrace. "My baby girl," she whispered. "I always knew you'd find your way back." "I couldn't have done it without you," Tiana replied, holding her mother tight. "Your support meant everything." Her brother was next, lifting her off her feet in an enthusiastic hug. "Sis, that was incredible. I didn't understand half of what you were playing, but it sounded amazing." Tiana laughed, the tension and focus of the performance finally releasing. "That's all I could ask for." The Golden Spoon crew arrived in a group, Carlos at the front with a bouquet of flowers even larger than the one she'd received on stage. "From all of us," he said, presenting it with a flourish. "Our star." "I miss you guys," Tiana admitted, suddenly nostalgic for the camaraderie of the restaurant kitchen, the shared complaints about difficult customers, the late-night conversations while counting tips. "Well, don't miss us too much," Carlos said with a grin, "though I have to say it's a lot less exciting without you there. No one else has exposed any hidden talents lately." Mr. Peterson approached somewhat awkwardly, looking out of place in a tuxedo that seemed slightly too tight. "Ms. Reynolds," he began formally, then seemed to catch himself. "Tiana, that was... well, I'm no expert, but it seemed perfect to me." "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by his presence, despite their complicated history. He had been the first to offer her a chance to play again, even if his motivations had been largely financial. "The owner wanted me to let you know that your table is always reserved. Anytime you want to come back," he continued. "As a guest, of course, not as staff." "I'd like that," Tiana said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As the evening continued, Chen introduced her to important figures in the classical music world, conductors, agents, recording executives. There was talk of a tour, of recording opportunities, of competitions and guest appearances with other orchestras. It was overwhelming, but in the midst of it all, Tiana felt a surprising calm. Whatever came next, she had already overcome the hardest part, finding her way back to herself, to the music that had always been a part of her, even when circumstances had forced her to set it aside. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the concert hall had emptied, Tiana returned to the stage. The cleaning crew was at work in the aisles, but they smiled and waved, recognizing her from the performance. The stage lights had been dimmed, but the piano remained, its lid closed now, waiting for the next performer. Tiana sat down at the bench, running her fingers lightly over the closed lid. 6 months ago, she had been serving dinner to entitled businessmen, swallowing her pride for the sake of tips, her dreams tucked away like childhood toys outgrown but too precious to discard. Now, here she was, her debut performance behind her, a future in music ahead. She opened the lid and played a simple melody, not Rachmaninoff or Chopin or any of the complex pieces in her repertoire. Just a simple tune her mother had taught her when she was 5 years old, sitting at their old upright piano with worn keys and slightly flat middle C. The sound floated through the nearly empty concert hall, a private epilogue to the evening's grand performance. Tiana smiled as she played, remembering the journey that had brought her here, the years of practice, the setbacks and sacrifices, the night when a billionaire's attempt to humiliate her had instead set her back on the path she was always meant to walk. She finished the simple melody and closed the piano lid gently. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, interviews, meetings, decisions about her next steps. The Young Artist program would continue for another 6 months, and after that, she would need to navigate the competitive world of professional classical music. But tonight, in this moment, it was enough to know that she had reclaimed her voice, that the music that had always lived inside her had found its way out into the world again, that sometimes, even when life takes unexpected detours, we can find our way back to where we're meant to be. Tiana stood, taking one last look at the empty seats where hundreds had stood to applaud her just hours before. Then she gathered her things and headed toward the exit, ready for whatever came next.